Hello, friends. If you are looking for a complete and in depth recap of Titanic 1997, you have come to the right place. In today's video, we will follow the unforgettable journey of Rose and Jack aboard the legendary Titanic, explore the powerful characters and emotional moments that make this film timeless, and uncover how a beautiful romance becomes a fight for survival when disaster strikes. So make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and let's get started. The story begins many years after the Titanic disaster, when an expedition searches the wreckage of the famous ship at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. The team is looking for a valuable diamond known as the Heart of the Ocean, which is believed to have been worn by a woman connected to the tragedy. During the search, an elderly woman named Rose Dawson Calvert hears about the discovery and realizes that the expedition is searching for something connected to her own past. She contacts the researchers and tells them that she was actually aboard the Titanic on its first and only voyage. Rose begins telling her story, taking everyone back to 1912, when she was a young woman from a wealthy American family. She boards the Titanic at Southampton with her mother, Ruth, and her wealthy fiancé, Cal Hockley. To the outside world, Rose appears to have everything: money, beauty, status, and a place among high society. But inside, she feels trapped by the expectations surrounding her. Her mother expects her to marry Cal because their family is struggling financially and the marriage would restore their social position. As Rose walks through the enormous ship, she sees the luxurious world surrounding her. The Titanic is filled with grand dining rooms, elegant staircases, expensive decorations, and wealthy passengers who believe they are traveling aboard an unsinkable masterpiece. But Rose feels uncomfortable among them. She understands that her future has already been decided by her family and she has little control over her own life. Cal, meanwhile, treats Rose as though she is already his possession. He gives her expensive gifts and expects her to behave according to the rules of their social class. Ruth constantly reminds Rose that she must marry Cal and secure the family's future. Rose tries to remain obedient, but the pressure becomes overwhelming. She begins feeling as though she is being pushed toward a life she never chose. Elsewhere on the ship, a young artist named Jack Dawson has won a third class ticket in a lucky poker game. Jack has almost nothing compared with the wealthy passengers, but he is energetic, adventurous, and excited to be aboard the Titanic. He sees the voyage as an opportunity to experience something extraordinary and believes that life should be lived freely rather than according to other people's expectations. As the ship prepares to leave Southampton, Jack and his friend Fabrizio celebrate their good fortune. They run toward the ship just before departure, laughing and excited about the journey ahead. Jack has no idea that this voyage will completely change his life. He also has no idea that he will soon meet a woman from a world completely different from his own. Rose, meanwhile, becomes increasingly miserable. Her engagement to Cal feels more like a prison than a promise of happiness. She looks across the ocean and wonders what her life will become after the wedding. Her mother believes she is protecting the family, but Rose feels that she is sacrificing her own freedom to satisfy everyone else's expectations. As evening arrives, Rose is overwhelmed by the pressure surrounding her. She walks toward the rear of the ship, away from the wealthy passengers and the people watching her. She looks out over the dark ocean and begins thinking about escaping the life that has been forced upon her. At this moment, her path is about to cross with Jack Dawson. Jack notices Rose near the stern and realizes that something is wrong. He approaches carefully and tries to stop her from making a desperate decision. Rose initially refuses to listen, but Jack's calm and unusual attitude makes her hesitate. Unlike Cal and the people around her, Jack does not treat Rose as a possession or a social obligation. He speaks to her as a person. Rose eventually steps back from the edge, but the moment leaves a powerful impression on both of them. Jack has no idea who Rose really is, while Rose begins to realize that this strange young man sees the world differently from everyone she knows. Their meeting is only the beginning, but it will soon change both of their lives forever. The Titanic continues sailing through the Atlantic, carrying thousands of passengers toward New York. Everyone aboard believes they are traveling toward a bright future. The ship is enormous, powerful, and considered one of the greatest achievements of its time. But hidden beneath the excitement of the voyage is a danger no passenger can see. Rose has escaped one moment of despair, but she still has to return to the life waiting for her. Jack, meanwhile, has no idea that the woman he just met belongs to one of the wealthiest families aboard the ship. Their worlds could hardly be more different, yet the Titanic has brought them together. As the voyage continues, Rose begins questioning everything she once accepted without hesitation. Jack's free spirit has shown her that another kind of life may be possible. But Cal and Ruth are determined to keep Rose within the boundaries they have created for her. Soon, Rose will have to choose between the future others have planned for her and the freedom she has begun to discover. And while the Titanic sails deeper into the cold Atlantic night, none of the passengers realize that their supposedly unsinkable journey is moving toward one of the most tragic events in history. The morning after Rose's encounter with Jack, the Titanic continues its journey across the Atlantic, surrounded by an atmosphere of luxury and excitement. For most passengers, the voyage is still a dream come true. They enjoy elegant meals, beautiful music, and the enormous spaces of the ship without giving much thought to what might be happening beyond the decks. But for Rose, everything feels different. A brief conversation with Jack has given her something she has not felt in a long time, the possibility that her life could belong to her. Rose returns to the world of first class passengers where everyone expects her to behave perfectly. Her mother, Ruth, is focused on maintaining their social position and constantly reminds Rose about her engagement to Cal. To Ruth, marrying Cal is not simply a romantic decision, it is the family's best chance of maintaining their wealth and reputation. Rose understands the pressure her mother is under, but she feels increasingly trapped by it. Every conversation about the wedding makes her feel as though her future is being taken away from her. Cal, meanwhile, remains confident that Rose will eventually accept the life he has planned for her. He treats their engagement as something already settled and expects Rose to follow the traditions of their social class. He gives her an extravagant necklace, the heart of the ocean, as a symbol of their engagement. Everyone around them sees the gift as proof of Cal's wealth, but Rose feels little happiness wearing it. To her, the beautiful necklace represents another part of the life she feels forced to accept. Jack's life aboard the Titanic is completely different. Traveling in third class, he has none of the luxury surrounding Rose, yet he feels more free than she does. He spends time with his friends, enjoys the ship, and finds entertainment wherever he can. Jack has learned to survive without money or status, and his confidence comes from his ability to appreciate whatever life gives him. This difference between Jack and Rose becomes one of the reasons she is drawn toward him. Eventually, Rose and Jack meet again. Their conversations become more natural, and Rose begins to relax around him. Jack does not care about her family name, her engagement, or the rules of first class society. Instead, he is interested in Rose herself. He asks about what she wants, what she enjoys, and what kind of life she would choose if nobody else controlled her decisions. These simple questions have a powerful effect on Rose because nobody in her world has ever asked her what she truly wants. Jack also begins showing Rose his drawings. He explains that he has traveled from place to place, drawing people and observing different lives. His art reflects the way he sees the world, without judging people based on wealth or status. Rose becomes fascinated by his perspective because it is completely different from the polished and controlled environment she has grown up in. She begins to understand that the world outside her social circle is much larger than she imagined. Rose's friendship with Jack soon becomes noticeable to the people around her. Cal is especially suspicious and does not appreciate seeing Rose spending time with a third class passenger. His jealousy grows because he knows Jack represents something he cannot give Rose: freedom. Cal can provide wealth, luxury, and social status, but he cannot give Rose the feeling that she is truly choosing her own life. Ruth also becomes concerned. She reminds Rose that their family depends on the marriage and that refusing Cal could have serious consequences. She tells Rose that women in their position have responsibilities and cannot simply follow their feelings. Rose listens, but her frustration continues growing. For the first time, she begins seriously questioning whether protecting her family's social position is worth sacrificing her own happiness. As Rose spends more time with Jack, she starts discovering parts of herself she had forgotten. She laughs more freely, becomes curious about the world outside first class, and begins challenging the rules that have controlled her. Jack does not try to tell her what to do. Instead, he encourages her to make her own choices and reminds her that life is too short to be lived entirely for other people's expectations. Jack eventually takes Rose into the third class area where she experiences a completely different atmosphere from the elegant first class dining rooms. Music fills the space, people dance without worrying about formal manners, and everyone seems genuinely alive in the moment. Rose is amazed by how much happiness exists outside the world she knows. For the first time, she feels completely free to enjoy herself. Their growing friendship becomes more meaningful as Rose realizes that Jack sees her as an individual rather than as Cal's future wife. She begins trusting him with feelings she has never shared with anyone else. Jack listens without judging her, and Rose starts imagining a future where she can make her own decisions. But Cal is becoming increasingly suspicious. He knows Rose is unhappy, but he believes the solution is to control her more tightly. His anger toward Jack grows as he realizes that Rose is becoming emotionally attached to someone outside their social world. Cal sees Jack as a threat to his relationship with Rose and to the future he believes he has already secured. Meanwhile, the Titanic continues moving through the Atlantic at impressive speed. The ship's officers receive warnings about ice in the region, but the voyage continues. The passengers remain largely unaware of the danger ahead. They are surrounded by confidence and luxury, and many believe the Titanic is too powerful to face any serious problem. Rose's emotional world, however, is changing rapidly. She has begun to understand that the life planned for her may never make her happy. Jack has opened her eyes to another possibility, but choosing that path would mean challenging her mother, breaking her engagement, and stepping away from everything she has known. As the night approaches, Rose and Jack's connection grows stronger. Their relationship is no longer simply a friendship between two passengers from different classes. Jack has become the person Rose trusts most, while Rose has become someone Jack deeply cares about. Neither of them knows how much their lives are about to change. At the same time, Cal refuses to accept that Rose might choose a different future. He believes that money, power, and social position will eventually force her back into his world. But Rose is beginning to realize that those things mean very little if she has no freedom. The Titanic sails onward through the dark ocean, carrying Rose, Jack, Cal, Ruth, and thousands of other passengers toward an unknown future. The ship seems unstoppable, but far ahead, hidden in the darkness, an enormous danger is waiting. The passengers continue celebrating, unaware that the journey that has brought Rose and Jack together is also bringing them closer to one of history's greatest disasters. As the Titanic continues across the Atlantic, Rose becomes increasingly drawn toward Jack and the freedom he represents. Every time she spends with him, she feels more like herself. Jack does not care about her family's wealth or her engagement to Cal. He simply wants Rose to experience life without constantly worrying about what other people expect from her. For Rose, this is something completely new. She has spent most of her life being told how to behave, what to wear, whom to marry, and what her future should look like. Rose's growing independence begins to worry her mother. Ruth knows that their family's financial situation depends heavily on Rose's marriage to Cal. She reminds Rose that their position in society is fragile and that marrying Cal is necessary to protect them. Rose understands her mother's fear, but she also realizes that she is being asked to sacrifice her entire future for the sake of appearances. The more Ruth pressures her, the more Rose feels trapped. Cal becomes even more suspicious of Jack. He notices the way Rose looks at him and realizes that their relationship is becoming more than a casual friendship. His jealousy quickly turns into anger. Cal believes Rose belongs with him because of their engagement and their social status. He cannot understand why she would choose someone who has almost nothing over a man who can offer her wealth and security. Jack, however, continues treating Rose with respect. He encourages her to think about the things she truly wants from life. He tells her about his travels and his belief that people should make the most of every moment because nobody knows what tomorrow will bring. Rose begins to take his words seriously. She starts imagining a future where she can travel, experience new things, and make decisions without constantly asking for permission. One evening, Rose and Jack spend more time together away from the formal first class environment. Their conversations become deeper, and Rose finally begins opening up about how unhappy she has been. She admits that she feels as though her life has already been decided for her. Jack listens carefully and does not try to tell her what she should do. Instead, he reminds her that she still has a choice. Rose's feelings for Jack become impossible for her to ignore. She knows that being with him could create serious problems, but for the first time, she feels genuinely understood. Jack represents everything her life with Cal lacks: adventure, freedom, and the ability to be herself. Rose begins realizing that she cannot continue pretending to be happy simply to satisfy her family. Cal eventually confronts Rose about Jack. His anger becomes clear as he warns her to stay away from him. He sees Jack as an outsider who has no place among their world. Rose tries to defend herself, but Cal refuses to understand her feelings. His reaction only strengthens Rose's belief that the life he offers is not the life she wants. Meanwhile, Jack finds himself becoming deeply attached to Rose. Although he understands the difference between their social positions, he does not allow it to stop him from caring about her. He sees something special in her and realizes that beneath the elegant clothes and wealthy background is a young woman who simply wants the freedom to live honestly. Rose eventually decides that she cannot continue allowing everyone else to control her. She meets Jack again and begins discussing what life could be like outside the expectations of her family. Jack tells her that she should not waste her life simply trying to make other people happy. His words give Rose the courage she needs to consider taking control of her own future. As their bond grows, Rose starts seeing the Titanic differently. The enormous ship that once felt like a prison now becomes a place where she can explore a completely different life. She has seen the wealthy passengers, but she has also experienced the energy and freedom of third class. Jack has shown her that happiness does not come from money or status. During one of their encounters, Jack shows Rose more of his artwork. His drawings capture ordinary people in a way that makes them feel important and alive. Rose realizes that Jack sees beauty in things her own world often ignores. She begins to understand why his presence affects her so deeply. At the same time, the Titanic's officers continue receiving warnings about ice in the Atlantic. The ship is traveling through a region where icebergs are possible, but the passengers remain confident. The Titanic is considered one of the safest and most impressive ships ever built, and almost nobody believes that anything serious could happen to it. The contrast between the passengers' confidence and the danger ahead becomes increasingly important. While Rose and Jack are discovering a new relationship, the ship is moving deeper into the cold northern waters. The people aboard continue enjoying their evening as if nothing could possibly go wrong. Rose's relationship with Cal reaches a breaking point. She realizes that marrying him would mean surrendering the freedom she has only just begun to discover. Her mother continues insisting that she must think about their family's future, but Rose finally begins understanding that she cannot spend the rest of her life living for other people's expectations. Jack becomes the person Rose trusts most. She knows that he comes from a completely different world, yet she feels safer with him than she does with the people who are supposed to protect her. Their connection is becoming powerful enough that neither of them can simply walk away. As the evening continues, Rose and Jack find themselves drawn closer together. They begin imagining a future beyond the Titanic, even though neither can know what lies ahead. For Rose, the possibility of escaping her arranged future feels more real than ever. But while the two young people dream about freedom, the Titanic continues racing through the darkness. The ocean ahead is almost completely black, and the crew remains focused on keeping the ship moving smoothly. Far away, an iceberg is drifting silently through the same waters. The passengers have no idea how close they are to disaster. They continue dancing, dining, laughing, and enjoying what they believe is an unforgettable voyage. For Rose and Jack, however, the Titanic has already changed everything. Their meeting has given Rose the courage to question her future, and Jack has found someone he never expected to meet. As the ship moves deeper into the night, the romantic story between Rose and Jack is about to collide with a much larger tragedy. The Titanic is still sailing confidently forward, but the calm ocean hides the danger that will soon change the lives of everyone aboard. The night grows colder as the Titanic continues its journey through the Atlantic. Inside the ship, everything still feels safe and luxurious. First class passengers enjoy elegant dinners and conversation, while music and laughter fill the grand rooms. Nobody imagines that the greatest danger of the voyage is approaching. For Rose, however, the most important thing happening is not the ship's journey but the growing connection between her and Jack. Rose has become determined to break away from the future her family has planned for her. She knows that her engagement to Cal is expected to lead to marriage, but her feelings have changed completely. The more time she spends with Jack, the more she understands how unhappy she has been. Jack encourages her to stop thinking about what everyone else wants and consider what she wants for herself. Eventually, Rose makes a decision that changes everything. She meets Jack away from the formal areas of the ship and tells him that she wants to experience life differently. Jack takes her to a part of the ship where she can escape the strict rules of first class. Rose begins feeling like an ordinary young woman instead of a wealthy passenger who must constantly behave perfectly. Jack introduces Rose to his world where people laugh, dance, and enjoy themselves without worrying about social status. Rose is surprised by how natural everything feels. She dances freely, laughs with the other passengers, and forgets about Cal and her mother's expectations for a while. For someone who has spent her entire life surrounded by strict rules, this simple freedom feels extraordinary. When Rose returns to first class, the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. The elegant rooms that once impressed her now feel restrictive. She understands that wealth has given her comfort but taken away many of her choices. Jack, who owns almost nothing, seems richer in freedom than the people surrounding her. Cal soon realizes that Rose has been spending more time with Jack. His jealousy becomes increasingly intense. He does not see Jack as a genuine rival because of his social position, but he understands that Rose feels differently around him. Cal tries to remind Rose of her responsibilities and the future they are supposed to have together, but his controlling behavior only pushes her further away. Ruth also notices that Rose is changing. She warns her daughter that their family cannot survive without the marriage to Cal. Ruth sees the engagement as necessary security and cannot understand why Rose would risk everything for someone she has only recently met. Rose feels guilty about hurting her mother, but she also realizes that continuing with Cal would mean giving up the life she wants. Jack and Rose continue meeting secretly. Their conversations become more personal, and Rose begins telling him about the things she has always wanted to do. She wants to travel, see the world, and live without constantly worrying about appearances. Jack listens and encourages her to believe that those dreams are possible. As their feelings grow stronger, Jack makes Rose a promise. She should never allow fear to stop her from living. Rose begins to believe him. She has spent so long thinking that her destiny is already decided that the idea of choosing her own future feels almost impossible. But Jack's presence gives her the courage to imagine another life. The Titanic's crew, meanwhile, continues monitoring the surrounding waters. The ship is traveling at high speed and warnings about ice have been received. The officers remain alert, but the confidence surrounding the Titanic is enormous. Many people believe the ship is so advanced that it is practically impossible for anything serious to happen to it. Rose and Jack remain unaware of just how dangerous the waters around them have become. Their attention is focused on each other and the future they imagine beyond the ship. Rose feels that she has finally found someone who understands her, while Jack realizes that his feelings for her are becoming stronger with every passing moment. Later, Jack takes Rose to the stern of the ship. Standing together above the dark ocean, they share a quiet moment away from everyone else. Rose looks out over the endless water and feels a freedom she has never experienced before. Jack encourages her to imagine that she can do anything with her life. Rose's confidence grows. She begins believing that she does not have to become the person her family expects her to be. She can make her own choices even if those choices are difficult. Jack's influence gives her the courage to face the possibility of leaving Cal behind. But Cal is not willing to let Rose go easily. His anger continues growing and he becomes determined to discover exactly what is happening between Rose and Jack. He believes that money and authority will eventually allow him to control the situation. He does not understand that Rose's feelings are no longer something he can simply command. The emotional distance between Rose and Cal becomes wider with every passing moment. Even when Rose sits beside him at dinner, her mind is somewhere else. She knows that she cannot continue pretending that everything is fine. Her heart has already begun choosing a different path. Jack and Rose eventually find themselves alone again, and their relationship reaches a deeper level of trust. Rose tells Jack that she is afraid of what will happen if she rejects the life planned for her. Jack assures her that she is stronger than she believes and that she deserves the chance to live freely. Their conversation leaves Rose determined to make a choice. She knows there will be consequences, but she is no longer willing to spend her life trapped by fear. For the first time, she begins imagining herself leaving the Titanic with Jack and starting a completely different life in America. Yet, the Titanic continues moving through the darkness, and the atmosphere outside the ship is becoming increasingly dangerous. The sea is unusually calm, making it harder to spot hazards in the distance. The crew continues watching the horizon, unaware of how little time remains before everything changes. Inside the ship, passengers prepare for another peaceful night. Music continues playing, lights shine through the windows, and the Titanic moves confidently across the ocean. Everyone believes the voyage will end safely in New York, but somewhere ahead, hidden against the dark horizon, an iceberg waits directly in the Titanic's path. The ship is moving toward it at tremendous speed, and the people aboard have no idea that their lives are about to change forever. Rose and Jack may believe their biggest challenge is escaping Cal and the expectations of their families. They do not yet realize that the greatest obstacle is not waiting inside the ship, it is waiting silently in the freezing ocean ahead. The night over the Atlantic becomes unusually quiet as the Titanic continues sailing through the darkness. Inside the ship, the passengers remain completely unaware of the danger surrounding them. The first class rooms are still filled with warmth, music, and conversation, while many passengers have already gone to their cabins. The ship moves steadily through the calm ocean, giving everyone the impression that nothing could possibly go wrong. But on the bridge, the crew remains focused on the dark horizon where visibility is extremely limited. Rose, meanwhile, has reached a point where she can no longer pretend that she is happy with the future planned for her. Her engagement to Cal feels more like a sentence than a promise of love. She knows that her mother expects her to marry him, and she understands the financial reasons behind that expectation. But her heart is no longer willing to accept it. Jack has shown her another way of seeing life, and she now realizes that freedom may be worth more than wealth and status. Jack and Rose continue spending time together whenever they can. Their conversations are no longer simply about escaping Rose's unhappy engagement. They talk about dreams, travel, art, and the kind of lives they would like to live after reaching America. Jack tells Rose about his experiences traveling with very little money, while Rose begins imagining herself doing things she never thought possible. She feels alive whenever she is with him. Cal becomes increasingly suspicious of their relationship. He notices the change in Rose and understands that something has happened between her and Jack. His pride makes it difficult for him to accept that Rose could prefer someone from third class. Instead of considering Rose's feelings, he becomes determined to control the situation. His jealousy turns into anger, and he begins looking for a way to separate Rose from Jack. Ruth also puts more pressure on Rose. She reminds her that their family's financial future depends on the marriage and warns her about the consequences of rejecting Cal. Ruth believes she is protecting Rose, but her words make Rose feel even more trapped. Rose finally understands that her mother is willing to sacrifice her daughter's happiness to preserve their place in society. The realization is painful, but it also strengthens Rose's determination to make her own decision. Jack becomes Rose's escape from that pressure. When she is with him, she does not have to pretend to be someone else. He never asks her to behave like a wealthy woman or reminds her of her responsibilities. He simply sees Rose as a person. That freedom becomes more valuable to her with every passing moment. The two eventually find themselves together away from the crowded areas of the ship. Rose admits that she does not know what will happen when they reach New York, but she knows she cannot return to the life she was expected to live. Jack encourages her to think beyond the rules that have controlled her. He tells her that the world is much larger than the small circle of wealthy society she has always known. Rose begins imagining a future with Jack, even though she knows their different social backgrounds will create problems. She understands that her family would never approve of him, and Cal certainly will not accept the situation. Yet she also realizes that remaining with Cal would mean giving up the freedom she has just discovered. While Rose and Jack grow closer, the Titanic continues racing through dangerous waters. Earlier warnings about ice have reached the officers, but the ship maintains its speed. The calm sea creates an especially difficult situation because there are no waves breaking against an iceberg, making it harder to see one from a distance. The lookouts carefully scan the darkness ahead. On the bridge, the officers remain confident in their ability to handle the ship. The Titanic is considered one of the greatest ships ever constructed, and nobody expects a disaster of this scale. The enormous vessel seems almost invincible as it cuts through the freezing water. Back inside, Rose and Jack have no idea what is happening on the bridge. Their world has become focused on their relationship and the possibility of a new life together. Rose feels that she has finally found a reason to escape the future she never wanted. Jack feels that meeting Rose has given his own life a new direction. Carl's anger, however, is becoming more dangerous. He refuses to accept that Rose might choose Jack. He believes his wealth gives him the right to determine Rose's future, and he begins thinking of ways to regain control. Rose's growing independence frightens him because he realizes that money cannot force someone to love him. Rose's mother continues trying to convince her that marrying Cal is the only sensible choice. She speaks about their responsibilities, their reputation, and the importance of maintaining their social position. Rose listens quietly, but inside she has already begun rejecting that future. She realizes that she would rather face uncertainty with Jack than live a comfortable life without freedom. The night becomes even darker and the temperature drops. The ocean is almost perfectly calm, creating a strange silence around the enormous ship. The lookouts continue searching ahead, but the darkness makes it difficult to identify anything that does not belong on the horizon. Then, in the distance, something appears directly ahead. The lookouts suddenly recognize the shape of an iceberg. The warning is immediately sent to the bridge. The crew reacts quickly, ordering the ship to turn while the engines are adjusted in an attempt to avoid the massive obstacle. But the Titanic is enormous, traveling at high speed, and changing its direction takes precious time. The iceberg grows larger as the ship approaches. Officers struggle to bring the vessel around it, but there is very little room to maneuver. The Titanic begins turning, yet the iceberg remains dangerously close. At the last possible moment, the ship manages to avoid a direct collision, but the enormous iceberg scrapes along the side of the vessel beneath the waterline. The impact is not immediately understood by most passengers. Many people feel a strange vibration or hear an unusual sound, but they do not realize that the Titanic has been seriously damaged. Inside, some passengers continue talking as though nothing important has happened. But deep below the surface, water begins entering the ship. The Titanic, once believed to be practically unsinkable, has suffered damage that will soon threaten thousands of lives. Rose and Jack are still unaware of the full danger, while the officers begin realizing that the situation is far more serious than anyone could have imagined. The peaceful voyage has now changed forever. The Titanic is still moving through the dark ocean, but beneath its luxurious decks, the first signs of catastrophe have already begun. The Titanic continues moving through the dark Atlantic after striking the iceberg, and most passengers still have no idea how serious the situation has become. The impact was not a massive explosion; so many people simply assume the strange vibration was nothing important. Some passengers even laugh about it, believing the ship is far too large and powerful to be affected by something as simple as an iceberg. But below the surface, the crew has already begun discovering the terrible truth. The officers inspect the damaged sections of the ship and quickly realize that water is entering several compartments. The situation is far worse than they initially hoped. The Titanic was designed to survive flooding in a limited number of compartments, but the damage has affected too many areas. The ship's designer, Thomas Andrews, studies the situation and understands that the vessel cannot remain afloat forever. His expression changes as he realizes that the ship everyone believed was practically unsinkable is actually doomed. Captain Smith receives the devastating information. He has spent his entire career commanding ships, but now he faces a disaster unlike anything he has ever experienced. The officers begin calculating how much time they have before the water reaches critical areas. The answer is terrifying. There is not enough time to save everyone. Meanwhile, Rose is still dealing with her own problems. She is with the first class passengers when she begins noticing that something is wrong. People are moving through the corridors. Crew members are speaking urgently, and the atmosphere has changed. Rose does not understand what is happening at first, but she soon realizes that the ship has struck an iceberg. Jack is also separated from Rose as the crew begins restricting movement between different areas. He knows that something serious has happened, but he has no idea how much danger the ship is actually in. He tries to find Rose while the situation around him becomes increasingly confusing. Passengers begin asking questions, but the crew struggles to keep everyone calm. Thomas Andrews explains to the officers that the Titanic will eventually sink. The ship's watertight compartments can slow the flooding, but the damage has gone beyond what the design can handle. The bow is gradually becoming heavier as water fills the lower sections. As the front of the ship sinks lower, water begins moving from one compartment to another. The crew now faces another terrible problem. There are not enough lifeboats for everyone aboard. The Titanic carries thousands of passengers and crew members, but the number of lifeboat spaces is far smaller than the total number of people. The lifeboats were designed according to regulations that were outdated compared with the size of the ship. The crew understands that even if every lifeboat is used, many people will be left behind. Captain Smith orders the crew to prepare the lifeboats and begin waking passengers. The message spreads slowly through the first class areas. Some wealthy passengers are confused because they cannot believe the Titanic is actually in danger. Others refuse to accept that the ship could sink. Rose's mother insists that they remain calm. She believes their first class status will ensure that they are taken care of. Cal, however, quickly begins thinking about his own survival. He understands that the situation is serious and wants to make sure he and Rose reach a lifeboat. Rose becomes increasingly uncomfortable with Cal's behavior. She sees that the man who claimed to love her is more concerned with controlling the situation than understanding what she wants. She begins realizing that the disaster has removed the illusion of security surrounding their relationship. Jack eventually finds Rose, but Cal has him arrested after accusing him of stealing the heart of the ocean. The necklace has been secretly placed in Jack's pocket as part of Cal's plan to get rid of him. Jack is taken away and locked below deck, while Rose is unaware of exactly what has happened. As the evacuation begins, the first lifeboats are brought to the deck. The crew orders women and children to board first, but many passengers hesitate because they still believe the Titanic will survive. Some lifeboats are launched with empty seats because passengers are afraid to leave the ship. Rose is expected to board one of the lifeboats with her mother. She knows that doing so may save her life, but she cannot stop thinking about Jack. She begins to realize that escaping without him would mean leaving behind the person who gave her the courage to live freely. Cal tries to convince Rose to get into the lifeboat. He promises that everything will be fine, but Rose no longer trusts his promises. She looks at the people around her and understands that the world she once believed was safe is collapsing around her. Eventually, Rose makes a decision. She leaves the lifeboat and goes back into the ship to find Jack. Rose runs through the increasingly chaotic corridors, searching for the man she loves. Water is already entering lower sections, and passengers are beginning to panic. The once beautiful Titanic is becoming a maze of confusion, with people rushing toward the upper decks while crew members try desperately to maintain order. Rose searches for Jack while knowing that every minute matters. She has no idea where he has been taken, but she refuses to give up. She eventually discovers that Jack has been locked inside a room below deck, with water rapidly rising around him. Jack tries to remain calm, but he knows the situation is becoming dangerous. Rose finds him and desperately searches for a way to free him. The key is not available, and there is very little time before the water reaches them. Rose refuses to leave him behind. She searches for something that can break the lock and eventually finds a heavy object that allows her to free Jack. Together, they escape as the water continues spreading through the lower levels of the ship. Now, the two of them must make their way toward the upper decks while thousands of passengers are fighting for their own survival. The Titanic is no longer the magnificent ship Rose first boarded. It has become a sinking maze filled with fear, confusion, and desperation. Jack holds Rose's hand as they run through the corridors. He tells her to stay close and never let go. Rose follows him, knowing that their chances of survival are becoming smaller with every passing minute. Above them, the evacuation continues, but the lifeboats are leaving one after another. Many passengers are still trapped inside, while others are struggling to reach the upper decks. The crew continues trying to maintain order, but panic is spreading rapidly. The bow of the Titanic is sinking lower, causing the ship to tilt. Everyone can now see that the situation is catastrophic. The ship that had been called unsinkable is visibly going down. Rose and Jack finally reach the upper areas of the ship, but they soon realize that surviving will be much harder than they imagined. The lifeboats are disappearing into the darkness, and hundreds of passengers are still waiting for a chance to escape. The night that began with luxury and romance has become a desperate fight for survival. Rose and Jack have chosen to stay together, but the sinking Titanic is giving them less and less time. The Titanic is now in a desperate struggle against the Atlantic, and the calm confidence that surrounded the ship only hours earlier has completely disappeared. Water continues entering the lower sections while the bow sinks farther into the ocean, forcing the ship to tilt forward. Passengers who once believed they were aboard the safest ship ever built are now running through corridors searching for lifeboats, family members, and any possible route to safety. Crew members shout instructions while trying to maintain order, but fear is spreading through every level of the ship. Rose and Jack have escaped from the lower decks, but they know that reaching the upper deck does not mean they are safe. Around them, people are beginning to understand that the Titanic is actually sinking, and there may not be enough lifeboats for everyone. Rose and Jack continue moving through the ship as quickly as possible, trying to reach the lifeboat deck. Jack stays close to Rose because the increasing tilt makes it difficult to keep their balance. Rose is frightened, but she refuses to leave him again. She has already chosen to abandon the future Cal planned for her, and now she is determined not to abandon Jack when his life is in danger. Their journey through the ship becomes increasingly difficult as doors are blocked, passengers crowd the corridors, and water begins appearing in areas that were previously completely dry. The beautiful interior that once represented wealth and comfort is now filled with confusion and desperation. When they finally reach the upper deck, they discover that the evacuation is already well underway. Lifeboats are being lowered into the freezing darkness, carrying only a fraction of the people aboard. Some passengers are crying and calling for relatives, while others are desperately trying to convince crew members to let them into the remaining boats. The class divisions that had seemed so important earlier are becoming less meaningful as everyone faces the same danger. However, the first-class passengers still receive better access to the lifeboats, while many third-class passengers remain trapped behind gates and barriers below. Jack and Rose realize that surviving will depend not only on luck, but also on their ability to keep moving. Cal is also desperately trying to secure a place for himself and Rose. He knows the ship is doomed, and his confidence has disappeared completely. He tries to convince Rose that she must come with him, claiming that he can still protect her. But Rose has finally seen through his promises. She knows that Cal wants control more than he wants her happiness. Even during the disaster, he continues trying to determine where she should go and what she should do. Rose refuses to return to him, choosing instead to remain with Jack despite the danger. As the ship's angle becomes steeper, the situation on deck becomes even more chaotic. People struggle to stand as the floor begins tilting beneath them. Objects slide across the decks, passengers lose their balance, and the crew tries desperately to keep people away from dangerous areas. Jack and Rose hold on to each other while searching for a safe position. They know that the lifeboats are rapidly disappearing, and the chances of finding another one are becoming smaller. Rose looks around and sees families being separated, people crying for help, and strangers helping one another despite the chaos. The officers continue loading lifeboats, following the order that women and children should be given priority. Some men are forced to remain behind, while women and children are placed into the boats. This creates painful scenes as husbands say goodbye to wives and fathers say goodbye to their children, knowing they may never see each other again. Rose begins to understand the true scale of the disaster. This is no longer simply about her and Jack. Thousands of people are facing the same terrible uncertainty, and many of them will not survive the night. Jack keeps reminding Rose to stay calm and stay with him. He knows that panic can be just as dangerous as the sinking ship itself. He searches for any possible opportunity to get Rose onto a lifeboat, but the situation becomes more difficult with every passing minute. Rose refuses to live without him, and Jack eventually accepts that they will face whatever happens together. The relationship, which began only days earlier, has now become the strongest source of courage in both their lives. Meanwhile, the ship's musicians continue playing music for the passengers as the evacuation continues. Their decision to keep playing is meant to create a sense of calm during an impossible situation. The music echoes through the night while people rush around them, creating one of the most emotional contrasts of the disaster. The passengers hear the beautiful sounds while knowing that the ship beneath them is slowly dying. Rose and Jack hear the music as they move across the deck, and for a brief moment the chaos seems strangely quiet. Thomas Andrews remains inside the ship, watching the flooding and understanding that the Titanic has almost no chance of surviving. He knows the ship was designed to withstand serious damage, but the iceberg has caused flooding across too many compartments. The water continues moving forward, and the ship's structure is being placed under enormous pressure. Andrews knows that the Titanic's time is running out, and he can only watch as the creation he helped design approaches its final moments. Captain Smith also remains on duty, refusing to abandon the ship. He has realized that the situation is beyond recovery, yet he continues trying to help the crew evacuate as many passengers as possible. The officers struggle to maintain order while the ship sinks lower. Their earlier confidence has been replaced by urgency, but they continue performing their responsibilities despite knowing how terrible the outcome may be. Below deck, many passengers are still struggling to escape. Some third-class passengers find gates closed between sections of the ship, making it difficult to reach the lifeboat decks. The barriers that separated the social classes during the voyage now become obstacles during the emergency. People shout and push against the gates, desperate to reach their families. Jack and Rose eventually encounter some of these passengers and try to help them find a way upward, knowing that every person deserves a chance to survive. As the Titanic tilts farther forward, Rose realizes that they cannot remain inside the ship. Jack guides her toward the open deck, where the cold air hits them immediately. The ocean around them is completely dark, and the lifeboats are now scattered across the water below. From the deck, Rose can see the enormous ship leaning into the sea, and the reality finally becomes impossible to deny. Cal refuses to accept defeat and continues searching for a way to survive. He uses his wealth and influence to try to secure a place on a lifeboat. but the rules are becoming meaningless as the disaster grows. He eventually realizes that Rose has chosen Jack, and his anger turns into desperation. The man who once believed he controlled Rose's future can no longer control anything. Then the ship's angle becomes dramatically steeper. Passengers begin sliding across the decks, desperately grabbing railings and other objects to stop themselves from falling. Jack holds Rose tightly as they struggle to remain upright. The enormous ship that once seemed impossible to destroy is now fighting against gravity itself. The sound of the ocean, the screams of passengers, and the creaking of the ship combine into an overwhelming moment of terror. Rose and Jack realize that the final stage of the disaster has begun. There are almost no lifeboats left. The ship is sinking rapidly, and the freezing Atlantic surrounds them on every side. Yet, Jack refuses to let Rose lose hope. He tells her that she has to keep fighting and that she must survive whatever happens next. Rose holds on to him as tightly as she can while the Titanic continues its terrifying descent into the darkness. The Titanic is now sinking rapidly, and the situation on board has become almost impossible to control. The ship's bow is deep beneath the freezing Atlantic, while the stern rises higher and higher into the night sky. Passengers cling to railings, staircases, and anything else they can hold onto, as the steep angle makes movement extremely difficult. The beautiful ship that had once been filled with elegant dinners, music, and laughter has become a terrifying place where thousands of people are desperately searching for a way to survive. Rose and Jack remain together, refusing to separate despite the chaos surrounding them. As the stern rises, the lights across the Titanic continue shining against the darkness, creating an eerie image over the ocean. From a distance, the ship still looks magnificent, but everyone aboard now understands that it is doomed. People who were separated from their families desperately call out their names, while others pray or simply hold onto one another. Jack keeps Rose close and searches for a safer position, knowing that the deck is becoming increasingly dangerous. Rose is frightened, but Jack continues encouraging her to stay focused and never give up. The remaining lifeboats are already far away from the ship, leaving thousands of people behind. Some passengers who manage to escape look back toward the Titanic and realize that the people remaining aboard have almost no chance of getting into another boat. The ocean is extremely cold, and the darkness makes rescue difficult. Those in the lifeboats are forced to listen to the sounds coming from the sinking ship, while knowing that their own survival depends on staying away from the disaster. On the Titanic, Jack and Rose move toward the stern as the ship rises higher. They are surrounded by frightened passengers, many of whom have accepted that they may not survive. Some people remain calm and stay with their loved ones, while others become desperate and attempt to climb toward higher areas. Jack continues looking for the safest possible place for Rose, understanding that the ship's final moments are approaching. Rose looks at Jack and realizes that he has changed her life completely. Before meeting him, she believed she had no choice but to marry Cal and live according to the expectations of her family. Now she understands that life can be uncertain and frightening, but it is still worth living honestly. Jack reminds her that she has a future ahead of her, and that she must keep living even if they are separated. His greatest concern is no longer escaping for himself, but making sure Rose survives. The Titanic continues breaking apart under the enormous pressure created by its angle in the water. The stern rises even higher, and passengers begin struggling to hold onto the deck. Jack and Rose find a place where they can remain together while the ship's final moments unfold. Around them,
The sounds of the disaster become louder, but Jack keeps Rose focused on surviving rather than allowing fear to take control. As the ship reaches an extreme angle, people begin sliding toward the lower end of the deck. Jack and Rose hold onto the railing and each other. The lights flicker, the ship groans, and the ocean becomes visible beneath them at a terrifying angle. Rose realizes that there may be no way to escape, but Jack refuses to let her surrender. He tells her that she has to fight for her life and that she cannot give up. The stern continues rising until it seems almost impossible that the enormous ship can remain intact. Thousands of people are now concentrated in a small area of the remaining deck. The passengers look toward the ocean below, knowing that the distance between them and the water is becoming greater with every second. The Titanic's final moments are unfolding before them, and there is nowhere left for most people to go. Eventually, the ship can no longer withstand the pressure. The Titanic breaks apart, sending enormous sections of the vessel into the ocean. Rose and Jack are thrown into the freezing water along with countless other passengers. The lights of the ship disappear as the wreckage sinks beneath the surface, leaving survivors scattered across the dark Atlantic. Rose and Jack struggle to stay together in the freezing water. Jack searches for something that can keep Rose above the surface, eventually finding a large floating piece of wreckage. He helps Rose climb onto it, making sure she is positioned as safely as possible. The water around them is brutally cold, and Rose begins losing strength, but Jack continues encouraging her to stay awake and keep believing that help will come. The surrounding ocean becomes strangely quiet compared with the chaos that had filled the Titanic only moments earlier. Hundreds of people are now scattered across the water, calling for help. Rose hears voices around her, but cannot see much in the darkness. She tries to remain conscious while Jack stays close in the freezing water. He continues reminding her that she must survive and that her life is not over. Jack knows that the cold is becoming dangerous for him, but he keeps his attention on Rose. He makes her promise that she will live a long life and never give up on herself. He tells her that she must eventually leave the past behind and build the life she always dreamed about. Rose listens carefully, understanding that Jack is asking her to survive even if he cannot. Rose promises Jack that she will live. She tells him that she will never give up no matter how difficult life becomes. Jack holds onto her hand while the freezing water surrounds them. Their conversation becomes quieter as the night continues. But Rose keeps repeating the promise because she knows it is what Jack wants most. Eventually, the voices across the ocean begin fading. The survivors who cannot find anything to keep them above the water slowly disappear into the darkness. Rose remains on the floating wreckage, desperately trying to stay awake. Jack remains in the water beside her, encouraging her until his strength begins to disappear. Rose refuses to let herself fall asleep. She remembers Jack's words and understands that surviving is now the way she can honor him. She knows that he wants her to experience the life she had once believed was impossible. She thinks about everything they talked about, the places they would see, the things she would experience, and the freedom she had only recently discovered. Eventually, Jack becomes too weak to continue. He tells Rose that she must never forget her promise. Rose holds his hand and tries to keep him close, but she realizes that he is no longer able to survive the freezing water. Their final moments together are quiet and emotional, completely different from the chaos that surrounded them when the Titanic sank. Rose is devastated, but she remembers what Jack told her. She refuses to give up. She knows that if she stays there forever, Jack's sacrifice will have been meaningless. With the last of her strength, she moves away from him and begins searching for a way to attract the attention of the rescue boats. The sky begins to brighten as morning approaches. Rose is still alive, but the ocean is filled with silence. The Titanic has disappeared beneath the Atlantic, leaving only wreckage and scattered survivors behind. Rose sees a nearby whistle and uses it to signal the rescue ship. Her voice is weak, but she keeps calling until the rescuers finally hear her. A rescue boat approaches through the freezing water. The crew searches among the survivors and eventually finds Rose. She is pulled from the water and wrapped in warm clothing, but her first thoughts are still about Jack. She looks back across the ocean knowing that he is gone, but she also remembers the promise she made to him. Rose has survived the sinking of the Titanic, but she has lost the person who gave her the courage to truly live. As she is taken aboard the rescue ship, she carries Jack's memory with her. The disaster has taken away her old life, but it has also given her a new understanding of what freedom, love, and courage mean. The Titanic disappears beneath the Atlantic, but Jack Dawson's influence on Rose will remain with her for the rest of her life. She has promised him that she will live, and now she must find the strength to fulfill that promise. The morning after the Titanic sinks, the vast Atlantic Ocean is filled with silence and scattered wreckage. The great ship that had been celebrated as one of the greatest achievements of its time has disappeared beneath the freezing water, leaving only small pieces of debris floating across the surface. The surviving passengers are gathered in lifeboats, exhausted, frightened, and unable to fully understand the tragedy they have just witnessed. Many are searching the darkness for family members and friends, hoping against hope that they may have survived. For Rose, the situation is even more painful because she knows exactly who she has lost. Rose remains on the floating piece of wreckage where Jack helped her survive. She is barely conscious from the cold, but she refuses to surrender. Jack's final words remain in her mind, reminding her that she has a life ahead of her and that she must continue living. She knows that he wanted her to experience everything she had once dreamed about. Even though the pain of losing him is overwhelming, Rose understands that surviving is now part of the promise she made to him. As the sky begins to brighten, Rose notices a nearby whistle attached to one of the lifeboat supplies. She gathers the last of her strength and begins blowing it, hoping that someone will hear her. At first, there is no response. The rescue boats are moving through the area, searching for survivors, but the ocean is enormous and the morning light makes it difficult to identify everyone. Rose continues calling for help, refusing to stop even though she is exhausted. Eventually, a rescue crew hears the whistle and turns toward her. The rescuers find Rose alive among the freezing water and quickly pull her aboard the lifeboat. They wrap her in warm clothing and try to help her recover from the cold. Rose is surrounded by other survivors, but she feels completely alone. The people around her are crying, praying, and asking about their missing relatives. Rose looks across the ocean and realizes that Jack is no longer there. The rescue ship eventually carries the survivors toward New York. The journey is quiet and filled with grief. Everyone aboard has a different story about the people they lost. Some passengers stare silently into the distance, while others hold on to photographs or personal belongings recovered during the evacuation. Rose has almost nothing left from her old life except the memories of Jack and the promise she made to him. When Rose finally arrives in New York, she is among the survivors waiting to be processed. She knows that her mother and Cal may have survived, but she has no desire to return to the life they planned for her. The disaster has changed her completely. She no longer sees wealth and social status as the things that determine her future. The experience aboard the Titanic has taught her that life can disappear without warning, and therefore she must make her own choices while she has the chance. Rose makes a decision to begin again under a new identity. She chooses the name Rose Dawson, using Jack's surname as a way of keeping his memory alive. It is a deeply personal decision because Jack had become the person who helped her discover the courage to live freely. By taking his name, Rose carries a part of him into the future while leaving behind the expectations that once controlled her. Her new life is difficult at first, but Rose refuses to return to the world she escaped. She remembers all the things she and Jack talked about doing. She decides that she will travel, explore new places, learn new skills, and experience the world without allowing fear to stop her. She understands that Jack wanted her to live fully, and she makes that promise the foundation of her future. Rose eventually fulfills many of the dreams she once shared with Jack. She rides horses, travels, explores new places, and experiences activities that would have been impossible in the restricted life she was expected to live. Every new experience reminds her of the young woman she was aboard the Titanic and the person Jack helped her become. She does not forget the tragedy, but she refuses to let it destroy her future. Cal's fate is also revealed through Rose's memories. After surviving the sinking, he eventually loses the fortune and social position that once seemed permanent. The world he depended upon changes, and his life no longer resembles the future he had planned. Rose never returns to him because she has already chosen a completely different path. The control he once had over her disappears permanently after the Titanic. Ruth also survives the disaster, but her relationship with Rose is never the same. Rose's decision to leave the life planned for her means that she no longer allows her mother's expectations to determine her choices. The tragedy has shown Rose that social pressure can never be more important than living honestly. She still understands that her mother acted out of fear and financial insecurity, but Rose refuses to sacrifice herself for those fears. As the years pass, Rose builds an independent life. She becomes the person Jack always believed she could be. She does not simply survive, she lives with purpose. She keeps the promise she made on the freezing Atlantic and refuses to allow the tragedy to define every part of her existence. Jack's memory becomes something she carries quietly, rather than something that prevents her from moving forward. Decades later, the elderly Rose hears about the discovery of the Titanic wreck. The expedition team is searching for the heart of the ocean, the famous diamond connected to the ship. When Rose sees images of the wreck and hears the researchers discussing the necklace, she realizes that the world is about to uncover a story she has kept inside herself for most of her life. Rose contacts the expedition and travels to meet the researchers. She begins explaining that she was aboard the Titanic and that she knows the real story behind the mysterious woman in the photographs they are searching for. The researchers initially have difficulty believing her because she is an elderly woman and the story seems almost impossible. But Rose begins describing details about the ship that convince them she was truly there. As Rose tells her story, the expedition members listen carefully. She describes the Titanic not as a historical object, but as a living world filled with thousands of individual lives. She remembers the elegant first-class rooms, the crowded third-class areas, the crew members, the passengers, and the people who never made it home. Most importantly, she remembers Jack Dawson. Rose explains how she met Jack and how he changed her life. She describes the pressure surrounding her engagement to Cal, her desire to escape, and the way Jack encouraged her to become the person she wanted to be. The researchers begin understanding that the Titanic story is not only about a ship sinking, it is also about the lives and dreams of the people who were aboard. Rose's memories take her back to the night of the disaster. She remembers the panic, the freezing water, the lifeboats, and Jack's final promise to her. Although more than 80 years have passed, the emotions remain powerful. She realizes that Jack has never truly disappeared from her life, because everything she became afterward was influenced by the courage he gave her. The expedition team finally understands the significance of Rose's story. The heart of the ocean is connected to her past, but Rose's memories reveal something far more valuable than a diamond. The true treasure is the story of the people who lived, loved, and died aboard the Titanic. As Rose finishes explaining her memories, she prepares to reveal what happened to the necklace. The researchers are eager to know where the famous diamond is, but Rose has spent decades carrying its secret. The decision she is about to make will bring her story closer to its final chapter.
Rose continues telling her story to the researchers aboard the expedition ship, and the memories of the Titanic become more vivid as she returns to the final hours of the voyage. The people around her listen in silence as she explains how the ship, once filled with confidence and celebration, slowly transformed into a place of fear and desperation. She remembers the elegant corridors, the grand staircase, the dining rooms, and the passengers who believed they were traveling toward a new life in America. But behind all those beautiful memories is the image of Jack, the young man who entered her life for only a few days but changed the direction of her entire future. As Rose speaks about Jack, she explains that their relationship began at a moment when she felt completely trapped. She had been preparing to marry Cal even though she knew she did not love him. Her mother had convinced her that the marriage was necessary because their family's financial situation was becoming difficult, and Cal represented security, wealth, and social status. Rose had been raised to believe that her duty was more important than her happiness. Meeting Jack challenged everything she had been taught. He came from a completely different world, but unlike the wealthy people around her, he never tried to control her. Instead, he encouraged her to discover who she really was. Rose remembers how Jack made her laugh and helped her experience parts of the Titanic she had never seen before. He introduced her to the lively world of third class, where passengers danced and celebrated without worrying about the strict rules of high society. For Rose, those moments were more meaningful than the elegant dinners she had attended with Cal. She had spent her entire life surrounded by people who told her how she should behave, but Jack simply wanted her to enjoy being alive. That difference made her realize how much of her life had been spent trying to satisfy other people's expectations. The researchers are particularly interested in the mysterious heart of the ocean. They explain that the valuable diamond is believed to have disappeared after the sinking and may still be connected to one of the survivors. Rose listens quietly because she knows exactly where the necklace came from. She remembers Cal presenting it to her as an engagement gift and remembers the way the necklace became connected to the terrible events that followed. To the researchers, it is a priceless historical artifact. To Rose, however, it represents an entire chapter of her life that she has carried with her for decades. Rose then recalls the moment when Cal used the necklace as part of his attempt to separate her from Jack. After Jack was accused of stealing it, he was taken away and restrained below deck while Rose was expected to escape on a lifeboat. But Rose could not simply leave him behind. She had already made her choice, and even though the ship was sinking, she returned to search for him. She remembers running through the corridors, hearing people desperately trying to escape, and finally finding Jack trapped while water rushed into the lower levels. That decision changed everything because Rose chose Jack even when survival seemed almost impossible. She remembers how Jack encouraged her to keep fighting during those final moments. When the Titanic broke apart and the survivors were thrown into the freezing Atlantic, Jack helped Rose reach a floating piece of wreckage that could keep her above the water. He remained in the freezing ocean beside her, knowing that the cold was becoming increasingly dangerous. Even then, his greatest concern was not himself. He wanted Rose to survive. He wanted her to leave the tragedy behind and live the life she had once been too afraid to imagine. Rose tells the researchers about the promise she made to Jack that night. She promised that she would never give up and that she would continue living no matter how difficult the future became. Those words became the foundation of her entire life. After being rescued, she understood that surviving the Titanic was not enough. She had to make something meaningful from the life Jack had helped her discover. That meant refusing to return to the life that had once trapped her and choosing her own path. The elderly Rose explains that she eventually fulfilled the dreams she and Jack had discussed. She traveled, explored new places, tried new experiences, and built a life completely different from the one her family had planned. She learned to ride, visited places she had once only imagined, and experienced the freedom that Jack had encouraged her to seek. Every new experience carried a small reminder of him. She never needed to forget Jack in order to move forward. Instead, she carried his memory with her while continuing to live. The researchers are fascinated by Rose's story, but they also begin to understand that the real treasure is not the diamond. Rose's memories have given them something far more valuable. the personal story of someone who survived one of the most famous disasters in history. She describes the Titanic as a world of thousands of individual stories rather than simply a famous shipwreck. Every passenger had dreams, families, fears, and hopes for the future, and many of those stories ended that night. Rose remembers the final moments on the ship with particular sadness. She recalls seeing the Titanic disappear into the Atlantic and realizing that the world she had known was gone forever. She remembers the freezing water, the silence after the ship disappeared, and the rescue that followed. But above all, she remembers Jack's final request that she live. Even after so many decades, she still carries those words as though they were spoken only yesterday. The researchers then ask Rose about her life after the disaster. She explains that she never returned to Cal and never allowed herself to become trapped in the social world she had once belonged to. She changed her identity and became Rose Dawson, carrying Jack's name as a private tribute to the person who had given her the courage to become independent. She did not spend the rest of her life living in sadness. Instead, she built a life that Jack would have wanted for her, filled with experiences and choices that belonged entirely to her. As Rose finishes another part of her story, the researchers remain amazed by how much she remembers. She can still describe the Titanic's rooms, the people she met, and the events of that night with extraordinary clarity. Her memories prove that historical tragedies are not simply dates and statistics. Behind every number is a human being who had hopes for tomorrow. Rose survived long enough to tell the story of those who could not. The expedition members continue searching the wreck for the heart of the ocean. They believe the diamond could be one of the most important discoveries connected to the Titanic. But Rose knows that the necklace has never been important to her in the same way. She has carried the memory of Jack far longer than she ever cared about the diamond. The necklace represents wealth and the world she escaped, while Jack represents freedom and the life she chose. Rose then looks toward the ocean and remembers the final promise she made. She understands that her entire life after the Titanic was shaped by that promise. She did not allow fear to control her, and she never stopped moving forward. She lived because Jack wanted her to live, and she made sure that his sacrifice had meaning. Back aboard the expedition ship, the researchers realize that Rose has one final secret. They still do not know what happened to the heart of the ocean after the sinking. Rose has listened to them searching for it and has heard them discuss its enormous value, but she has remained silent about its true fate. The researchers believe the necklace may have disappeared forever, yet Rose knows that the diamond has remained much closer than they could ever imagine. As Rose looks through the memories of her youth, she remembers the necklace one final time. She remembers the night Cal gave it to her, the way it became part of the conflict between him and Jack, and the moment it disappeared from her life. The heart of the ocean is no longer simply a valuable diamond to her. It is a symbol of the world she left behind when she chose freedom. The researchers continue examining photographs and historical records while Rose sits quietly, watching them search for something she already knows the answer to. Her story has revealed the truth about Jack, her relationship with Cal, and the final hours of the Titanic. But the fate of the diamond remains unknown. She has carried that secret for decades, and now she must decide whether she is finally ready to reveal it. As the night settles over the expedition ship, Rose looks out toward the dark ocean. Somewhere beneath those waters rests the wreck of the Titanic, along with the memories of Jack and thousands of other passengers. For Rose, the ocean is not simply the place where the ship disappeared. It is the place where her old life ended and her new life began. She closes her eyes and remembers Jack once again, not as a tragic figure, but as the young man who taught her to live without fear. She remembers his smile, his confidence, and the way he encouraged her to believe that she could become whoever she wanted to be. More than 80 years later, his influence remains a permanent part of her identity. And now, with the researchers searching for the heart of the ocean, Rose prepares to make one final decision about the diamond. The secret she has protected for all these years is finally about to be revealed, bringing her extraordinary story aboard the Titanic toward its emotional conclusion. Rose's story reaches its most emotional stage as the researchers aboard the expedition finally begin to understand that the elderly woman sitting before them is not simply someone who survived the Titanic. She is a living connection to the people and events they have spent years studying. She remembers the ship before the disaster, the passengers who walked its halls, the crew members who worked aboard it, and the young man named Jack Dawson, who became the most important person in her life. As she continues speaking, the researchers realize that her memories contain details that could never be found in photographs or historical records. For Rose, however, these are not pieces of history. They are memories of people she once knew and loved. The researchers remain fascinated by the story of the heart of the ocean. They have spent years searching for the famous diamond because of its enormous historical and financial value. They believe that if the necklace can be recovered, it would become one of the most important objects ever connected to the Titanic. Rose listens as they discuss the diamond, knowing that their search is based on a story that began during her youth. She remembers how the necklace was given to her by Cal and how it became part of the complicated events between herself, Cal, and Jack. What the researchers see as a priceless treasure, Rose sees as a symbol of the life she left behind. Rose then explains more about the night the Titanic sank. She remembers how the ship's beautiful interior slowly transformed into chaos, how passengers desperately searched for lifeboats, and how the crew tried to maintain order as the situation became increasingly hopeless. She remembers seeing people separated from their families and realizing that many of them would never see one another again. The Titanic had been designed as a symbol of human achievement, but in those final hours, everyone aboard was reminded that no amount of engineering, wealth, or social status could completely protect them from nature. She remembers Jack's determination to keep her alive. Even when the ship was breaking apart and the ocean was swallowing everything around them, Jack remained focused on Rose's future. He knew that she had been given a second chance to live the life she wanted, and he refused to let her believe that her story had to end with the Titanic. His final request was simple but powerful. She had to survive, keep her promise, and continue living. Rose had made that promise while they were surrounded by freezing water and darkness, and she had carried it with her for the rest of her life. After being rescued, Rose understood that she could not return to the person she had been before boarding the Titanic. The young woman who had once accepted that her future was already decided was gone. She had experienced love, freedom, fear, and loss in a matter of days, and those experiences changed her permanently. She chose to begin again, leaving behind the expectations of her family and the world she had once known. She took the name Dawson and built a life based on the promise she had made to Jack. Rose explains that she spent the following decades living fully. She traveled, experienced new things, and refused to let fear prevent her from following her dreams. She did not live as though she were waiting for death or constantly mourning the past. Instead, she treated every new experience as a continuation of the promise she had made on the Titanic. Jack had wanted her to live, and she honored him by living boldly. She became the person he believed she could be. The researchers listen as Rose describes the many things she experienced after the disaster. She remembers photographs, places she visited, and moments from a long life that would have been impossible if she had remained trapped by the expectations of her old world. She remembers learning new skills and discovering parts of herself that had never been allowed to exist before. Every one of those memories reminds her of Jack because he was the person who first told her that she was capable of choosing her own future. As Rose's story continues, she reveals that she never told the full truth about Jack to everyone around her. His memory remained deeply personal, something she carried quietly rather than turning into a public story. She knew that people might focus on the romance or the tragedy without understanding what Jack truly meant to her. He had not simply been the man she loved, he had been the person who helped her understand that her life belonged to her. The expedition members finally begin asking about the diamond again. They want to know whether Rose remembers what happened to it after the Titanic sank. Rose remains calm and tells them that the heart of the ocean was never the most important thing she carried away from the disaster. She has spent decades living without it, while the memory of Jack has remained with her every day. The researchers begin to understand that they have been searching for the wrong kind of treasure. Rose looks toward the ocean and remembers the Titanic's final moments. She remembers the ship disappearing into the darkness and the freezing water surrounding her. She remembers holding on to the floating wreckage while Jack remained beside her. She remembers the promise she made and the moment she realized that Jack would not survive. These memories are painful, but they also remind her why she continued living. The elderly Rose then returns to the present and looks at the people listening to her story. She realizes that after all these decades, she has finally told someone the complete truth. The researchers now know who Jack was, what happened to him, and why Rose chose the life she did afterward. They understand that her story is more valuable than any object they could recover from the wreck. But Rose still has one final secret. She knows where the heart of the ocean is. The researchers have spent years searching the Titanic wreckage for the necklace, believing it may have disappeared forever. Rose has carried the answer with her for decades, but she has never revealed it. The diamond survived the disaster, but its journey continued far beyond the sinking of the Titanic. Rose has kept it hidden because she never wanted its value to become more important than the memories attached to it. Rose remembers the necklace as it looked on the night she wore it. She remembers Cal's obsession with it and the way it became part of his attempt to control her. She also remembers the role it played in her escape from the life he had planned for her. Over time, the diamond became a reminder of the world she had left behind rather than something she wanted to possess. The researchers remain unaware that the necklace is actually in Rose's possession. They continue discussing the possibility that it could still be somewhere inside the wreck. Rose listens quietly, knowing that the truth is much closer than they realize. She has no interest in selling it or claiming its financial value. To her, the necklace is simply an object from a past she has already moved beyond. As the conversation ends, Rose looks toward the ocean once again. She thinks about the young woman she once was and the elderly woman she has become. She realizes how extraordinary the journey has been. She boarded the Titanic believing that her future belonged to someone else, but she left the disaster determined to control her own life. Jack gave her the courage to make that change, and she spent the rest of her life proving that his faith in her was justified. Rose's story also reminds the researchers that the Titanic was not simply a shipwreck. Thousands of people aboard had their own stories, relationships, dreams, and unfinished futures. The disaster changed history, but its greatest impact was felt by the individuals who lived through it. Rose's survival allows at least one of those stories to be remembered in detail. Before leaving, Rose quietly reflects on everything she lost that night. She remembers her old identity, her family expectations, her relationship with Cal, and most importantly, Jack. But she does not allow herself to be consumed by sadness. Jack would never have wanted that. He wanted her to live, and she did exactly that. Rose has now reached the end of her story, but one final action remains. The heart of the ocean, the diamond that brought the researchers to her, is still with her. She understands that the necklace has no real meaning in the world she created after the Titanic. It belongs to the past, just as Cal's world belongs to the past. Rose prepares to let go of it. She knows that once the diamond is gone, the final physical connection to that part of her life will disappear. But she also knows that Jack's memory does not depend on the necklace. She has carried his memory for more than 80 years, and nothing can take that away from her. As Rose stands quietly above the ocean, she looks toward the horizon and remembers Jack's promise to her all those years ago. She has lived the life he wanted for her. She has traveled, loved, experienced the world, and grown old. Now, after a lifetime of keeping the past close, she is finally ready to release the last symbol of it. The researchers still do not realize what Rose is about to do. They have spent years searching for the heart of the ocean, never knowing that the woman telling them the story holds the answer in her hands. Rose looks at the necklace one final time, and the story of the Titanic moves toward its final emotional moment. Rose's story finally reaches its emotional conclusion as she sits quietly aboard the expedition ship, looking back on more than 80 years of memories. She has told the researchers everything she remembers about the Titanic, from the moment she first stepped aboard as a young woman surrounded by wealth and expectations to the final moments when the great ship disappeared beneath the Atlantic. She has spoken about her family, her engagement to Cal, her meeting with Jack, their short but unforgettable relationship, and the terrible night when the Titanic sank. But now, after telling the story she has carried inside herself for almost her entire life, Rose understands that there is one final thing she must do. The researchers remain fascinated by the mystery of the heart of the ocean. They have spent years searching for the famous diamond because they believe it could still be somewhere among the wreckage of the Titanic. To them, recovering the necklace would be an extraordinary discovery, something that could connect the modern world directly to one of history's most famous disasters. Rose, however, sees the diamond differently. She remembers it as a symbol of the wealthy world that once controlled her life, the same world that expected her to marry Cal and sacrifice her freedom. After everything she experienced, the necklace no longer represents beauty or wealth to her. It represents a life she chose to leave behind. Rose quietly takes the heart of the ocean in her hands and looks at it one final time. The diamond brings back memories of the night Cal gave it to her and the complicated events that followed. She remembers wearing it aboard the Titanic, remembers Jack's presence, and remembers the chaos that came after the iceberg struck. But more than anything, she remembers how Jack helped her understand that material possessions were meaningless compared with the freedom to choose her own life. The necklace may be worth an enormous amount of money, but Rose knows that its true value has always been connected to the memories surrounding it. Without telling the researchers what she is about to do, Rose walks toward the edge of the ship. She looks out across the dark ocean where the Titanic disappeared decades earlier. The sea has remained almost unchanged, but Rose has changed completely. The young woman who once stood on the Titanic, believing she had no control over her future, has become an elderly woman who has lived a long and independent life. She remembers Jack's final request that she survive and live fully, and she realizes that she kept that promise. Rose then releases the heart of the ocean into the ocean below. The diamond disappears into the darkness, returning to the same sea that swallowed the Titanic so many years earlier. The researchers are unaware of what has happened, and Rose does not regret her decision. She does not need the necklace anymore. She has spent her entire life proving that Jack's final words mattered more than any treasure. The diamond belonged to the past, and now she has finally allowed it to remain there. After letting go of the necklace, Rose returns to her room. She looks through photographs and memories from the long life she built after the Titanic. Each photograph represents a promise kept. She remembers the places she traveled, the experiences she had, and the dreams she once shared with Jack. She did not simply survive the disaster, she built a life filled with the things she once believed she would never have the courage to pursue. Rose's memories then return to Jack. She remembers the first time she saw him, the conversations they shared, the moments when he made her laugh, and the way he encouraged her to see the world differently. Their relationship lasted only a short time, but its influence lasted for the rest of her life. Jack gave Rose the courage to become independent, and she carried that courage with her through every stage of her life. Even after decades, she still remembers him with the same warmth and gratitude. The story then moves into Rose's final moments of reflection. She is surrounded by the memories of a lifetime, but she does not seem afraid. She has lived long enough to fulfill the promise she made on the Titanic. She has experienced the world, discovered love, faced challenges, and grown old. The tragedy that once seemed like the end of everything ultimately became the beginning of a new life for her. Rose closes her eyes and returns in her imagination to the Titanic. The wrecked and broken ship is transformed in her memory into the magnificent vessel it was on the night she first boarded. The grand staircase is bright again, the rooms are filled with people, and the atmosphere is peaceful. Rose imagines herself moving through the ship as a young woman once again, but this time there is no fear and no pressure surrounding her. She imagines seeing the people she knew aboard the Titanic again. The passengers who died that night appear in her memories, no longer frightened or desperate. She remembers the musicians, the crew, the passengers, and everyone whose lives were connected to the voyage. Among them is Jack, waiting for her at the grand staircase. Rose sees Jack exactly as she remembers him, young, confident, and full of life. He reaches toward her and she walks toward him. The scene represents the reunion Rose has carried inside her for decades. Jack was never forgotten, and in the final moments of her life, she is able to return to the place where their story began. The emotional power of the ending comes from the fact that Rose did not die on the Titanic. She lived. She kept her promise. She grew old and experienced a lifetime that Jack never had the opportunity to experience. She carried his memory with her while building a future that he had encouraged her to pursue. Her return to the Titanic in her final memories represents not a return to tragedy, but a peaceful reunion with the people and memories she had lost. The story of the Titanic is therefore much more than the sinking of a famous ship. It is the story of thousands of people whose lives were changed forever on one terrible night. Among them were Rose and Jack, two people from completely different worlds who found each other during a voyage that was supposed to end in New York. Their relationship was brief, but Jack's influence gave Rose the courage to escape a life she did not want and become the person she was meant to be. The Titanic itself remains beneath the Atlantic, a reminder of human ambition, tragedy, and the unpredictable power of nature. The ship was designed to represent confidence and technological achievement, but its sinking demonstrated how quickly even the greatest human creations can be overcome. The passengers who boarded believing they were beginning a safe and exciting journey, never imagined that the voyage would become one of the most famous tragedies in history. For Rose, however, the Titanic became something even more personal. It was the place where her old life ended and her new life began. She lost Jack, but she gained the courage to live. She lost her future with Cal, but she gained the freedom to choose her own path. She lost the world she had been raised to belong to, but she discovered a much larger world waiting beyond it. The memories of Jack remain with Rose until the very end. She never allows his sacrifice to become meaningless. Every adventure, every journey, and every moment of freedom is part of the promise she made to him in the freezing Atlantic. Jack wanted her to survive, and Rose did more than survive. She lived a full life. The final image of Rose's memories brings her back to the grand staircase of the Titanic. Jack stands among the passengers, and Rose walks toward him as if no time has passed. The people around them represent the lives lost during the disaster, while the beautiful ship represents the world that existed before everything changed. Rose and Jack finally reunite in her memory, bringing their emotional journey to a peaceful conclusion. The story ends by reminding us that some people may only remain in our lives for a short time, yet their influence can last forever. Jack Dawson was only part of Rose's life for a few days, but those days changed everything. He taught her to be brave, to make her own choices, and most importantly, to live without fear. And Rose kept that promise for the rest of her life. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this Titanic 1997 movie recap, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing movie breakdowns. See you in the next video.